Minigames. Nobody asked for any of them, but they're here, and I can't just let things be here, and Kingdom Hearts no less, without ranking them. So, yeah. Minigames are polarizing, but you know what's not polarizing? Cookies. That's right, it's a sponsorship, baby, but not just any old sponsorship. This is something I've been wanting for years now. Someone sent me cookies, and I'm here to sell those cookies. A longtime viewer and patron named Chris, and let me just plug that Patreon real quick, reached out to me and said, hey, I've got this cookie business, Chris's Cookie Company. It's small, it's really just friends and family buying the cookies right now. Do you want to try some cookies and give your thoughts in a video? Easiest yes of my life. So a few business emails later, yada yada, Chris shipped me these cookies. They offer 7 flavors. I picked out salted caramel and chocolate, double chocolate raspberry, and snickerdoodles, an all-time favorite of mine. They arrived in a little box. I opened that box. There was gold inside. The salted caramel ones, beyond just tasting great, have a perfect texture, not too chewy, not too hard, and I'm not typically a big chocolate guy, but the chocolate raspberry cookies are extremely pleasant, and the snickerdoodles legitimately remind me of the ones my grandma makes, and that is high praise. That lady does not play around. Believe me when I say it is in your best interest to snag some of these Chris cookies. And I'm honestly just really excited to share something from someone who's not just a viewer but a small business owner and one making excellent cookies at that. So if you want in on this, you can go to chriscookieco.com and at checkout use the promo code REGULARPAT, all one word, to get $4 off your order. In Cage 2, you have to beat the Expedition minigame to unlock sweet memories, but if you want sweet memories in real life, you can just buy some of these cookies.
Get that off a fortune cookie?
Alright, it's a good thing I'm stocked up on cookies because I've got a lot of minigames to talk through. As is tradition for these granular list projects, I have to lay out a few exceptions and caveats because it isn't always entirely clear what is and isn't a minigame. Typically, you can consult your in-game journal or report for what's listed under its respective minigame section, but I take a few qualms with this at times. The Olympus Cups in Cage 1 and 2, for example, I don't think really qualify. They're basically just the game's base combat with minor stipulations, so I don't see it being worth our while to cover that here, despite Jiminy's categorization. Likewise, we'll ignore any Mirage Arena matches, Battle Gates, or Link Portals, and the Cage 2 Agrabah Chasm of Challenges. Gummy ship segments and dives, while erring closer to the side of minigames for me, happen so frequently that I'm more inclined to view them as just straight-up gameplay shifts, but I did cover them fairly thoroughly in a previous video, linked here. Lastly, I didn't count anything that was time-sensitive, that is, things you can't replay past a certain point, so no Riku Race, no Fill Barrels in Cage 1, and no Monstro's Belly Brawl in Recom, not that any of them would really be sorely missed. In some older videos on this channel, I've given some occasional thoughts on minigames as a general concept, and I often arrived at the opinion that minigames should, like, work in core gameplay mechanics or learn skills in order to be considered successful or a good use of the player's time. I think I was full of shit, to be honest. Today we're going off like 80% vibes. It's a much more amorphous definition, sure, but I think it's the only real way to tackle this. Does the minigame feel good? I'll have actual critiques here and there, but most of the time I'm just focused on whatever's giving me the most dopamine, even if they're relatively simple and uninvolved compared to technically deeper but more annoying or boring minigames. Anything is fair game for a minigame's ranking here. The obvious stuff, but also aesthetics, visual and audio feedback, and even the music. Alright, let's equip our mini command and get crackin'.
Looks like I'm headed for the games.
There'll be minigames above this one that are less fun or more annoying, but I can at least say that they work and don't collapse under some of the most bafflingly obvious oversights. Deep Jungle is strangely home to 2 minigames, the least impressive of which is vine swinging. Unless you went for the Platinum Trophy, which requires you to at least attempt this minigame, I wouldn't blame you if you never even realized this was here. And there's decent odds you had no idea that there are 4 different modes for this game, some of which replace the vines with snakes. But you know what you can replace the vines and snakes with? Nothing. As in, why bother grabbing the vines when you can come back with Glide and obliterate the course by just flying past the actual minigame? The intended method here is fine enough, you're just trying to time your jumps right to get through the area as quickly as possible, but this reads like they forgot that Sora could play this beyond the story visit to Deep Jungle. And it's a head-scratcher because there are other minigames in Cage 1 that force Sora back into his base movement capabilities, sometimes in spots where it wouldn't really matter. That's exactly what should happen here, but it legitimately feels like a mistake. Adding in the fact that there's no reward for participating in this aside from that coveted Mickey symbol, it's an easy pick for the worst minigame in the series. At least this flower can help you in a speedrun.
The games are coming up.
I don't want to come off like someone who thinks that Sora pushing Winnie the Pooh on a swing isn't cute as fuck, because that's something only an idiot would think. But Pooh's swing still manages to make me feel like an idiot anyway, since you sort of have to do poorly on purpose to win, at least the first time. For the purposes of getting a high score and ultimately Sora's cheer ability, you need to launch Pooh as far as possible, but only the final push really matters, and it all comes down to how you time your button press when Owl flaps his wings. Ignoring that the timing for this has always felt nebulous to me at best, the first run-through of this game requires you to get Pooh to land on Eeyore's house, which means you have to like sandbag the minigame and intentionally get a middling score. Your goal is to be good enough that Pooh flies a decent distance, but not too good that he ends up in the bushes. It can be surprisingly frustrating to try to have mediocre timing on purpose. But even when you're going for a big distance, this is just so bare bones, silly old bare bones even, and easily the worst of the 100 Acre Wood minigames.
I thought you liked games.
Well, maybe not easily the worst, since it's spiritually succeeded by the Honey Pot, a Cage 2 minigame that takes place in the same area and generally follows a similar structure. This time we're cutting out the middleman and just swinging Pooh round and round to dislodge his head from this honey pot. I typically understand Sora as having good intentions, but initiating this minigame gives us a potential glimmer of that anti or rage form, since you can optionally let Pooh suffer through this claustrophobic nightmare a little longer for a laugh. He's clipping through the thing, the poor fuck. This game boils down to timing 2 button presses at the most opportune moments with some assistance from this bar in the top right. It's short, it's boring, but at least it doesn't have a sort of confusing win condition like the initial Cage 1 swing game, so I'll put it 1 spot above.
Quit using our friend for your games!
I think the best thing I can say about the Twilight Town minigames as a whole is that they serve as a pretty effective way to demonstrate the power difference between a memory-wiped Roxas and a fully powered-up Sora. They serve as odd jobs for Roxas in exchange for beach funds, and they serve as pathetic chores for Sora to crush beneath the weight of his movement skills and infinite combos. I guess you could say killing bees during Bumble Buster is more exciting as Roxas, since it's a bit more of an even fight, as Sora can eviscerate them with a Magnet Thunder combo. It's just a watered down mob fight, and the mobs can't really hurt you that badly. Next.
We're not gonna play your games.
These lower spots are going to trade off between things that are boring or incredibly short and things that are actively infuriating. The latter gets its first rep here with the lovable mushroom number 8, assuming your love language is violence. This mysterious tower loiterer is already infamous in the Cage community for being a more aggravating and animated version of the Grandstander minigame, which, yes, I'll put miles above this. You'd think they'd be roughly the same thing, but this fucker of a fungus drops faster than my respect for his organization counterpart in DDD.
Dark Rescue's my middle name.
The mushroom isn't reciting any truly putrid lines, but he is always aggravatingly out of reach of a crucial Keyblade swing. It's possible the mushrooms got a raw deal in general, because if they were just there to mess around with and only gave their D&G weapons and synth drops, I might feel more positively toward them. But when getting a Keyblade and a Burger King crown is tied to getting a good grade on their minigames, it's sure to result in a fair amount of frustration. Number 8 is also a great example of the fairly homogeneous strategy for satisfying a good handful of the Mushroom 13, which tends to involve fucking around with Berserk Charge or Negative Combo. Seriously, using either of those abilities is the most efficient approach for 5 of the 12 mushrooms, and this gets old really quick.
You want to enter the games, right?
Birth by Sleep Final Mix was kind enough to introduce a sort of spiritual and more emotional successor to the Mushroom 13 by way of its unversed missions. Today's emotion is anger, as Deep Space's gluttonous goo, while totally solvable with some strategies, just feels like shit to fight. Like I said, we're going off vibes here, and this guy is failing the check. It just feels bad, like it's trying to be Struggle from Cage 2, but struggling to be even half as good as that. I hate the conveyance with this thing. It can look like you've knocked a ton of its balls out, let me repeat, knocked out a ton of its balls, but most of them just get immediately slurped back up. This has to go on for the longest 2 minutes of your life, and even if you succeed at getting more balls than the goo, you'll end up spending a ton of time just running away from it. Sounds good, let's run away and never return.
He's up there by the video games.
Back over to the mushrooms, we have the Lexius fungus of Agrabah's treasure room, number 5, which is basically just a punching bag with regenerating health. I'm of a mixed mind on some of the mushrooms because while I like the idea of being able to come back to things after growing and getting new skills, in the context of this minigame I'm a bit annoyed by the prospect of attempting to get a good score and not knowing that you literally do not possess the necessary tools to get an S or even A or B rank. In the case of number 5 here, you're best off just coming back with Final Form and spamming Faraga with Bond of Flame equipped. But my level 99 Sora was also able to just no-brain mash combos on him and still get an S rank, so it really doesn't even have to take a ton of thought.
Let those fools play the little game.
No, I'm not talking about an uncomfortable moment with the TSA, I'm talking about the Twilight Town minigame Junk Sweep. The premise for this minigame is that a guy is too old to clean up a bunch of his shit on his property, so he's hired you, but he's also judging you on how many swings you take to demolish all of his trash. So when I say this minigame is garbage, I mean it twice. I guess it could hypothetically teach the player that their combo finishers have different effects than their standard weapon swings, but when the most efficient way to play this is to slowly nudge around the piles of garbage and risk a tetanus infection, any goodwill this game had flies out of the window and into the dumpster. It's just unfun, and I won't accept anything less than constant dopamine.
Goes and wins the first games he ever enters, dazzling the whole town.
Let's keep up the pattern and go back to a mushroom, this time number 9, who's literally dancing on Demyx's grave. I don't think this mushroom is particularly bad, it's just one of several mushrooms where the goal is to hit it a bunch and very quickly, but it at least asks a bit more strategy of the player than number 5 and isn't infuriating like number 8. But it's a victim of the very samey berserk charge strats that we'll be seeing over and over, so it sort of falls through the cracks.
Come on, keep up. In the game.
Hey, do you want to play Mario Kart? Oh, you do? Well, I'm sorry, I don't have an extra pair of Joy-Cons. I only have this lifetime pass to Disney Town that you can redeem at the entrance booth for a chance to go fuck yourself. Here's Rumble Racing. Full disclosure, there will be things higher up that are probably technically worse and less impressive, but they're also quicker and thus waste less of my time. I'm trying very, very hard to not let the optional rewards and trophies tied to any given minigame affect my ranking of it too harshly. It is beyond brutal that you're expected to complete each Rumble Racing track as each character to get the Platinum Trophy for Birth by Sleep, and it's also brutal having to sit through it even one time during Terra's visit. The 5 mandatory laps around the country chase track is, to me, legitimately worse than some of the absolute blink and you miss at nothings that we'll be covering later. There is such little substance to this, I honestly feel like Mario Kart didn't deserve to be used as a comparison, even as a bit. Big, empty tracks, count it one singular song that we'll be repeating on every lap of every track, no items, grating sound bites. It reminds me of Roxas's Limit Break from Days. A black hole sucking in all of the fun and all of your time. There's at least an occasional hazard, like these tornadoes, a shortcut here and there, and the most pathetic attempt to inject at least some sort of variety or item play in the mix with this little barrier shield thing, but that's really all I can muster up in the way of praise. I guess if I had to pick a favorite track, I'd be tempted to pick the Castle Circuit. It's sort of fun to drive through Disney Castle, but it's also the biggest and therefore longest track, so it's a bit of a catch-22. Kingdom Karts this is not, but maybe someday.
A game's no fun.
Back on over to the unversed missions, we have the Belly Balloon. If that means nothing to you, think of it as like a special tank toppler. If that also means nothing to you, first of all, I'm proud of you for living a better life than me, and second, you can think of it as like a large body that's slightly more mobile and prone to gastrointestinal distress. The gist of this one is that you need to hit the valve on its back to cause it to deflate until it's eventually super small. Hitting the front, of course, causes the gas meter to go up. Taking on the role of a sentient Pepto-Bismol is less than thrilling, and the balloon is surprisingly slippery, and it's overall not a ton of fun trying to sneak behind it and whittle it down. Like the mushrooms with the negative combo or berserk charge abilities, many of the unversed missions are easily answered with the Ven D-Link, which grants you haste, at least when you're playing as his 2 friends. They're friends, did you know that?
Early in the game.
Speaking of the mushrooms, let's hop on over to the Marley Shroom, number 11 in Timeless River. This is yet another mushroom where the goal is to hit the fungus as fast as you can, and once again you can abuse negative combo or berserk charge to make quick work of it. I'm not a huge fan of this guy showing up in the relatively narrow waterway, but I do at least like the number counter above the shroom's head, which is one of the more direct references that the mushrooms make to their corresponding organization member. I feel like this minigame should start with Sora whispering something threatening to the mushroom. I know a rat who cooks fuckers like you for breakfast.
Gosh, it sure is yummy!
You know what I just realized? Maybe Ansem the Wise isn't as bad as we thought. A weird way to open the cargo climb segment, but hear me out. When Sora plays these minigames, he's doing this manual labor for the citizens of Twilight Town, and they don't pay him a dime. Jiminy Cricket scribbles in his little book, that's Sora's reward. But Ansem the Wise programmed the simulated Twitowners to pay fair wages to Roxas when he completed his work. Anyway, I can't think of anything less fun in real life than pushing a heavy object up an incline, but Cage 2 made it fairly quick and painless, and it's kinda satisfying to hit and deflect the cart when you trigger its revenge value, because that's pretty much what it is.
Revenge.
The Cage 1 minigames ain't great. They're trying though, they're great triers, except for Vines and Pooh's Swing. Block Tigger, I feel like, is onto something but not quite done cooking. And for the record, I would personally never block Tigger, unless he had a blue check and started trying to sell me bounce coin. This game and the next make use of the rush feature, which is coincidentally a rushed feature. It tends to be more reliable during this game, and while I definitely struggled to get it working properly when I played as a kid, nowadays you just need to stand in front of a carrot and press triangle when the prompt is available, and it pretty much plays the game for you. But the game is also not entirely forthcoming that you need somewhat specific positioning to make this work. It also makes me sad that doing well in this minigame sends Tigger into a small existential crisis.
Oh, what's going on? Maybe there's something wrong with my tail.
Game and set!
And you know what gets me existential? Watching someone I deeply care about climb into a tree hole and just get fucked up on honey. That's Pooh's goal in Pooh's honey tree, and your job is to facilitate his gluttony by guarding him as he floats to the top of said tree. Sorry for saying float, I didn't mean to take you back to 2019 there. The bees are the antagonists of this game, and after some consideration, I'm team bees actually. Imagine you just stocked your refrigerator and a guy with shirt but no pants shows up and just rolls around in your groceries. These bees should sting to kill. The problem with this minigame is that it tries to help you but ends up getting in your way. Landing a hit on a swarm of bees will briefly take control away from you and try to send Sora to the nearest and highest branch. Sometimes it works, but sometimes you bonk your head and fall down to ground level. Sora cannot sustain any more head injuries. This Donald moment is what causes Dream Drop Sora to rear his head 10 years later.
Whoa there! That is so unfriendly!
Standing at the base of the tree gives you the option of using the rush command, which if done successfully will auto-jump you to Pooh's location, but you also lose 5 licks every time you press triangle regardless of the outcome. Explain that shit.
Well, maybe in your game that's how things work.
Let's quick slide over to the world that never was and talk about the Xemnas Shroom, Mushroom number 1, who I wouldn't necessarily describe as superior. This one is pretty much a basic reaction time test in which you need to use the reversal command until quick slide appears, which knocks the mushroom off guard and allows you to get your hits in. I wouldn't call it fun, but it does feel sort of rewarding to get the hang of it, and it isn't something you can just cheese with NC or BC, so points for that. It also did a great job of helping me reinforce my 9's times table. Those are tricky. 9 times 6 is 54, that shit never felt right to me. My girlfriend just told me that all of the solutions for 9's times tables up to 10 equal 9 when you add the two numbers. Like 9 times 6 is 54, 5 plus 4 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27, 2 plus 7 is 9. That's nuts. I think she's a witch.
Please sign me up for the games.
So, Kingdom Hearts 2 came out in 2005, which is like just on the tail end of the totally tubular and radical skateboard epidemic of the 90s and early aughts. It didn't matter what the fuck you were doing during that bracket of time, if you existed at that particular moment, you would also be skateboarding. Disney characters skateboarded, everyone on TV skateboarded, and it did not matter if the premise of the content was intrinsically related to skateboarding. KH2 jumped on that trend, and to this day remains the only game in the series where you can shred. Okay, Ven shreds a little bit in Remind. While it's a neat novelty for Sora to pop a sick method grab in between slaughtering nobodies, the actual structured minigames involving a skateboard usually end up being hollower than the place where Maleficent resides. So I'm lumping these 3 skateboard games together, which are SB Freestyle, SB Street Rave, and SB Workshop Rave. I wish SB stood for SpongeBob, that'd be sick. Sadly, you're just thrown into an open location with a skateboard and expected to do a bunch of the same 2 or 3 tricks to get a high score. Freestyle is in Radiant Garden, which is true to its name, you're just trying to get the highest score possible without hitting the ground. Street Rave is similar, except you get 5 chances to hit the ground, and on the 5th the game ends. The Workshop Rave is set in Santa's workshop and has a time limit, but the best way to get a good score is to do this. They're not bad, they're just a bit shallow. Like, I think of Spyro 3, which came out 5 years prior and had a deeper skateboarding system despite its main gameplay also having nothing to do with skateboarding. So when the goal is a very open get points objective, I get bored pretty quickly with the aforementioned 2 or 3 tricks. There are some other SB yada yada minigames later that are a bit more interesting.
Game Grid?
And next I'll just put Mail Delivery, which at least has a more pointed and much shorter objective than the skateboarding games we just covered. The best part of this minigame is using it to grind money for Roxas's ill-fated beach vacation. The next best part is that it only takes like 10 seconds even if it's the first time you're playing it. I think there should be an alternate ending where Roxas commits a federal crime by opening the mail intended for this small bird and gets imprisoned a second time in another computer.
What's going on?
Rechain of Memories actually has some pretty solid minigames. Granted, if you don't count that belly brawl, it only has 5, so fewer chances to fail than most. Everything else finds its home in the 100 Acre Wood, and the worst of these by my estimation is Tigger's Jump-a-thon, which is really just a game of Simon. So it's not that it's bad, it's just Simon, and I haven't found Simon too incredibly fun since I was in elementary school. You just memorize where Tigger jumps and then copy it by pressing the right buttons on your PlayStation controller. Or your Xbox controller. There are stumps out there with the Xbox buttons painted on them. It's real, it's happening, and I have to get right with it. It's 2023. I'm just having trouble catching up. It's like a generational thing. I'm not problematic. The only problem I have is remembering what the fuck is going on after a handful of jumps because I have shit short-term memory. Up next, mail delivery.
The letter has truly gone missing.
Phil has been in the business of setting up objects for people to hit for at least 11 years in the KH series, and that originates in Birth by Sleep with the Break the Urns minigame. While I'm not counting the KH1 iteration of this task thanks to its time-sensitive nature, I still think I'd rather do that than this. There's nothing actively bad about the BBS take on hero training, I just don't find it as satisfying as chucking the barrels or hitting the yellow urns in KH2. These ones just don't feel right, they don't have the same oomph as those KH2 ones. The feedback just doesn't taste as good, you know? This version of the game is at least unique in that you're competing against someone, specifically a young Hercules, who can potentially snipe points from you. Luckily, you can perform hijinks and walk on some of these barrels to more quickly destroy some urns, which should terrify Herc if KH1 is anything to go by, but unfortunately it does not. Maybe the trauma originates somewhere in those 10 years in between.
Victory in the games comes down to two simple words.
Heading back to KH2 for our next mushroom, the Psychic Shroom number 7, who waits in the Twilight Town tunnelway for someone to bludgeon it. It's another hit the guy as fast as possible mushroom, and is basically the more interesting version of number 5, as this one at least moves around and fights back. So at minimum, there is some encouragement between picking a different strategy and finding a balance between keeping your distance and delivering hits, though the most effective solution does end up being Final Form Reflega, which can probably be said of most things in Kingdom Hearts 2.
This is no time for games.
And that takes us to the Vexen Mushroom, number 4, also a fan of creating clones and being annoying. Just like how I find number 7 to be an improvement over 5, I think the same can be said of 4 over 7. Instead of focusing all your attacks on one entity with 1 HP bar, the name of the game here is Evasion while dealing single hits to dispatch the clones. I just find it more fun to avoid several enemies and in turn target multiple things instead of the one-on-one with the Psychic Shroom. I also feel like there's at least a handful of reasonable strategies for this game, though weaving in and out of the mushroom's attacks and firing off shots with Wisdom Form is usually going to be the way to go. But Wisdom Form falls off in the campaign basically the second you get Master, so I appreciate when the minigames encourage its use.
It's all just a game.
Next up is the unversed mission in the Keyblade Graveyard, the Floating Flora, as opposed to the Free-Falling Fauna or the Mid-Air Merryweather. It's fitting that the minigame variant in the last world is modeled off of the Mandrake, which is to Unversed as the Hot Rod is to Heartless, the Dancer to Nobodies, and a third bad thing to another group. Even though the Floating Flora is, again, a more involved version of the Grandstander minigame, it isn't nearly as satisfying or memorable. The goal is to keep 1, 2, or 3 of the floras in the air and collect the balls they drop. Which, why are these balls so boring looking? I want more colorful balls. Mark my fucking words on that, these balls are far too dull. Why are they orange and tan and that's it? Massive points off for this. If you use a shot lock that doles out a ton of hits, you can pretty easily rack up triple 9s on this guy, so there's at least the novelty of maxing out the score with nearly no effort required on your part.
What games?
Let's hop back over to Castle Oblivion for our next recon minigame, which is one I respect more than I like, Bumble Rumble. This one honestly skews away from even feeling like a minigame because it pretty much builds off of the card system employed throughout Chain of Memories proper, which is already hit or miss depending on who you talk to. I think it's a neat oddity to have something close to a combat segment in the usually peaceful 100-acre wood, with the bees once again serving as our antagonists, understandably so. They're just trying to make their honey and live their lives, and then a couple of dipshits show up to invade their personal space or bathe in their hard work. I honestly don't know how Pooh functions without constant supervision. The guy's probably a walking clump of welts when Sora's not around. The minigame is cuter than it is fun. As I mentioned, it's the card system but molded into a minigame with your basic attack cards, healing cards to refill the honey gauge, and a modified arrow-like spell to blow away the bees. There's even a slate you can build to launch the honey pot back at the bees, which would be like attacking me by throwing my hard drive at my head. These bugs got such a bad deal for no reason.
Looks like it's game over.
Is throwing a character into an area with a bunch of weak mooks and saying kill all of those things actually a minigame? Not really, otherwise we'd be considering the 1000 Heartless Battle a minigame and probably ranking it pretty highly. But if you slap a timer on that sucker and give it an entry in the journal, that's a minigame. The unverse mission for BBS Olympus is the Jelly Shades, which is unique in that it's just an unverse from the vanilla game, same name and same properties. I guess they ran out of budget. They couldn't even book thieves after all, just the town near it. The goal here is to kill as many of these guys as possible within the time limit, and again, this is hardly a minigame. But there's few things on this earth better than destroying a bunch of jelly shades at the same time and hearing the ear-shattering crunch of all of their bodies collapsing simultaneously. Inject that shit into my veins. Of course it's good enough to put this above 26 other minigames.
If they gatecrash the games, you can forget about the match.
We'll knock out a few more unversed missions here and head over to the Castle of Dreams for the Lone Runner, which is visibly and intrinsically not lone, so bad name, I guess. And they really hop more than run, so multitudinous hoppers would have been a better name, and that's probably why I'm not in charge of developing video games. The objective here is to defeat... to defeat as many of the boots as possible in 90 seconds. I'd prefer if they always took one hit to kill regardless of your level, but other than that, there's at least some variety to separate it from other games and how it's forcing the player to focus on the speed of their movement and not just their attacks. You can reasonably do well by chasing the shoes down and attacking them physically, but there's also the route of using commands with a wide range like Thundaga. I also wish you had the option to disable your finishers for this minigame, since using enough physicals can build up your finisher, which can often be a wholly unhelpful time sink that hits 0 enemies.
The games.
And yet another unversed mission here is the Vitality Vial, a variant of the Vial File, which is like a slightly edgier green Requiem. The vial, while retaining healing properties, is also capable of flooding the entire area with a purple toxic mist. If you or loved ones have suffered from moderate to severe nerve damage since 2011 or later, you may be entitled to financial compensation. This one rhymes with the Lone Runner, but has a more interesting gimmick to me. You still have to chase down your target, but hitting it releases happy fumes that counters the poisonous gas, and instead of an imposed time limit, here you're just trying to survive for as long as possible, which is different from most of these games. Once again, making mobility the primary concern as opposed to raw damage output is an appreciated shakeup.
They are video game figures.
Continuing our trend of movement-focused minigames, let's glide over to Beast Castle for Zoldan's Mushroom at number 3. I hope you didn't think we were done grabbing balls, because there's still a few more of those types of games to cover. This is another big ol' ball bonanza. It's raining balls, and I'll keep rating entries like these so long as it continues to make me laugh, and last time I checked, yeah, no, I'm still having fun. Mushroom 3 is refreshingly pacifist, the only one besides number 13 to be entirely non-violent. You don't have to hit it, you don't have to avoid it hitting you, you just have to chase it around and scoop up its balls. If there's one thing Cage 2 does better than all of the other games, and believe me when I say I've been searching, it's feedback. There'll be even better examples of this later on, but anytime you're collecting a bunch of stuff en masse and they swirl around you and make a satisfying noise, that's just chef's kiss. That's a little rat smooch if I've ever seen one. Once again, this mushroom is a mobility test, but I also really like how it asks you to think about how best to attract all these balls, and that amounts to not only moving quickly and accurately, but stacking on as many draw abilities as possible, as opposed to toggling negative combo or berserk charge for the 90th time. It's simple and otherwise unnoteworthy, but pleasant.
I heard about this new game.
For as many minigames as Cage 3 has, it may come as a surprise that they tend to hit more than miss, at least as hard as a minigame can hit, and thus it took this long for it to appear on the list. Cage 3's answer to the Mushroom 13 is the Flantastic 7, which I generally think are more engaging and overall less frustrating than their darker counterparts, but sometimes a bit derivative of them. The lowest of the Flans fittingly rears its vitamin C producing head in Arendelle and feels like something of an echo of a mishmash of mushrooms from Cage 2. It's another kill the thing in 90 seconds type of game, but I'm not completely sure what the intent is here. Judging from the information bar, I think the game wants you to focus on blocking its attacks and riding its grape sauce to the source and hitting it, but that also feels way more precise, time-consuming, and cumbersome than just using thunder and wildly hitting anything near you. It just seemed weird that I was able to go into this with no concept of strategy and really just winging it, and ending the 90 seconds feeling like I sort of bumbled through it, but then still getting the best result. But it isn't necessarily unfun, so here it lies.
Proving ourselves in the games.
Coming in at number whatever we're at now, we have the Expedition, a Cage 2 100-acre wood minigame which finally allows you to take control of the wood's denizens and command them as you see fit. I wish you could order them to destroy these bees that dare to exist in their presence, but they all fly into panic mode, leaving you to deal with murdering the bugs yet again. We continue to take and take from these bees. It's charming enough to be in charge of the poo crew, but the setting is fairly boring and the obstacles besides those aforementioned bees amount to the occasional falling rocks and ice that glows, and it's only slippery when that happens. That's just how ice works here. Those things will cause the party to lose courage, but the bar also gradually depletes over time, I'm assuming because they're all losing confidence in Sora for taking so long. But this minigame does give big Search for Christopher Robin vibes, so it gets a lot of goodwill for that.
Quit the games!
And I think it's only fair to put the Expedition's predecessor, Pooh's Muddy Path, one spot ahead. Honestly, on any given day, they could swap places. The Expedition is a bit snappier and will end quicker if you know what you're doing, but I find the Muddy Path a bit more charming because you know I love jumping on things and doing little puzzle bullshits. The vibes are much less frantic here, but a bit more complex since you have to find each character individually, and they all have a little gimmick assigned to them. Admittedly, it can be a bit confusing since most of them you can handle as Sora on his own, but you need to drag Pooh all the way to the top of the area to coerce Piglet out of the tree hole. Pooh also does not move at a pace that's super conducive to getting this the fuck over with, so that's fun. What do you think Rabbit, Eeyore, and Roo are talking about? That's like a forbidden trio. That's not a group that's getting screen time together, ever. I feel like they all need to be supervised. But I do think the Muddy Path is like quintessentially KH1. It's got emphasis on platforming and observation. It's a little bit unintuitive in some spots, but ultimately endearing.
You sign up for the games.
Objectively, there's no fruit funnier than the banana. There's no fruit with higher slapstick potential, the shape raises some eyebrows, and the minions worship it as a god, I'm assuming. I've never seen any of those movies. All this to say, the banana flan does not meet my expectations for a banana-themed minigame. I'm putting it this high because it's still fine for what it is, but it's another one that feels like a slightly punched-up KH2 mushroom, like the Land of Dragons one, except there's like one big guy that can end my run instead of any of the smaller ones. It's more mechanically interesting, and there are a handful of ways to rack up your points, and is the only minigame I can think of that ends by being assimilated into the enemy, so that's unique. But it's another one of those games where you have to divide your attention between mobility and dealing as many hits across a wide area as possible.
The games are divided into two brackets.
Heading back over to Birth by Sleep for our next one, it's the Enchanted Dominions Flame Box. This guy is a variant of the Spider Chest, and unlike most of the other special unverse, nothing about its design is really relevant to its minigame. It being both spider and chest doesn't really play into how it spits out SpaghettiOs meatballs for you to hit, so I'm not really sure why they went with this particular unverse for this game. But for what it is, it's decently entertaining. It's another keep XYZ from hitting the ground type of minigame, but the object you're juggling actually hurts to the touch. There's a lot of sodium in those fake meatballs. And instead of the usual one target, we have several, so that allows for a variety of tactics to be implemented while guarding the floor. Bear in mind, the only way to finish this game is to eventually lose, so enjoy those third-degree burns, Ven. He seems to be handling it well.
Game over.
None of the KH100 Acre Wood minigames should have made it this high, but I can't deny the allure of Tigger and his giant pot. Look how big it is. Maybe it just snuck up here because it's relatively straightforward and fairly quick compared to its competition. Tigger bounces on into the giant marijuana, he throws his nuts at you, and you gotta hit those nuts. And yeah, sure, I have the humor of a 4th grader, but I'm over here loving life, and you're over there pretending it's not funny. I'll be completely honest, I have no clue about how the scoring works here. Like, I know there is a method to the madness, but sometimes you hit a nut and you get 1 point, sometimes you get like fucking 10. Is it the height at which you strike the nut? Is it how many nuts you strike in a row? It's sort of mystifying. I'm not sure if I even want to know. This game can challenge my depth perception a bit, but it's another fairly basic but satisfying reaction time test, and I need those as I creep toward my late 20s. Also, shout out to this game for making you think about the length of the keyblade you use. That's a rare thing to consider outside of combat, and even in combat sometimes. And also for momentarily taking away your high jump and other abilities, like vine swinging should have. Whoever said childcare is something serious that shouldn't be treated like a game is a fucking square. That's right, don't forget about Dream Drop Distance. If I can't, you shouldn't get to either. To its credit, the small Dream Eater diversions included in 3D are pretty inoffensive and also have the benefit of leveling up your party members, so it's nice to have such an immediately and obviously tangible benefit to participating in these games beyond just being rewarded with like an orichalcum or something. I sort of debated even including these since they're so brief and pretty out of the way, like they're technically locked behind a paywall or relegated to chests and drops since you need their corresponding item to actually play. The lowest of these Dream Eater activities is the aptly titled Balloon. Can't talk DDD without talking about balloons in some shape or form. This is very basic, you're just hitting the balloons back at your pets, getting more points for letting the balloons get closer to you before hitting them. I'm sure this was slightly better on the 3DS, but I'm not complaining about an opportunity to smack the big boy middle button on my PS4 or 5 controller. To be honest, I found this kind of lovely. It's nice to just play catch with your children pets, though I would have loved to hear literally any other song, or at least a version of it without the la-las. I'd prefer a lawless society.
Sure, I'm game.
Haven't talked about one of these goddamn mushrooms in a few minutes, so let's take a look at the Larxene Shroom number 12 over at the Old Mansion. As far as hit a bunch of the things before time runs out games go, this one's decently fun. The environment here, to KH2's credit, actually spices up the game a bit, as all of the pillars in the mansion's front yard sort of get in your way of just zipping around and slaughtering all of the mushrooms. It seems pretty apparent from how the shrooms spawn around the perimeter that you're intended to hunker down in the middle and deal with them from a distance. This essentially turns the minigame into a shooting gallery, since Wisdom Form is the way to go here once again. Although the main thing I want to shoot by the end of the game is the camera, which is doing its best but also gives me severe whiplash as it tries to track down all of my lock-on targets. Still, this one is different enough from the other mushrooms and doesn't overstay its welcome.
Don't you want to make it out of the game?
Here's a minigame that I forget exists from the time it ends until I next play through KH2 and reach this part. It's gift wrapping, you know, in Halloween Town 2. Since there's very little reason to return to this minigame after its usage in the story, it's easy for it to fall through the cracks. But I actually kind of like how this serves to progress the plot of the world and that you get to participate in it instead of it happening off-screen. KH2 does this on occasion, where some of its minigames are baked into the world's plot, and this is our first example of that, and something KH3 will continue. They're all pretty basic, quick, and inoffensive, but they should be if they're mandatory, so it's hard to complain too much about this. Once again, feedback is king here. It is so satisfying to fill up these presents. If I received a Christmas present filled with several smaller boxes and a bunch of candy canes stuck to a clump of teddy bears, I would be so sad. Luckily, these are only for the experiment who was born to die. Lock, Shock, and Barrel are fairly ineffective here and easily knocked unconscious by your toy cannon, but I'd still much rather this than experiencing a panic attack while fighting them in the evil playroom.
I gotta spruce this place up for the game!
At number Who Cares, why the fuck is only one of the 3 Hunchback Gargoyles featured so prominently in the Water Barrel Training Toy minigame? Ignoring the fact that I usually start this game and then immediately back out to receive the benefits anyway thanks to a very cool oversight, this isn't too bad. It's basically pinball with some additional inputs by way of the chunky triggers which allow you to control the water jets and push your Dream Eaters into flowers and chests. Once again, it's actually kind of charming and veering on fun. It only lasts a minute and is way more engaging than traditional pinball, which I've always found boring as sin. Well, I guess that would depend on what kind of sinning you're doing. Real quick, let's rank the sins from most to least boring. Number 7, Sloth, obviously. I think 6 would be Envy, that's just being salty from afar. Greed is number 5, shares a lot of real estate with Envy IMO. Envy just breeds greed. 4 gets tricky, I'll go with Gluttony. Your mileage may vary, it really just depends on how exciting food is for you. Pride is number 3, it has parades and everything. At number 2 is Wrath. Unless you're quietly seething, Wrath is gonna deliver on entertainment. And number 1 is Lust, don't think I need to explain that much further. Anyway, yeah, Water Barrel.
No more games!
I can't really in good conscience let the training toys go any higher, even though I do find them oddly palatable for how much shit I tend to give Dream Drop's other facets. The last toy is the Candy Goggles, formerly known as the Treasure Goggles in the original 3DS release. I don't know, there's just something fun, as shallow as it is, about shooting candies at your Dream Eaters. They're all thinking candy thoughts and it's up to you to help them. I don't know why they're running away though, do they not want the candy? Eat the candy! Eat the candy, you fucking Technicolor disasters! It's crazy to think how totally foreign this would have looked to someone who'd only played KH1 in 2002. Like, what the fuck happened in those 10 years? It's short, it's sweet, and now my children pets are on the sugar high of their lives. Jesus Christ, they're terrifying.
Sure is spooky.
Do you want to just get the rest of the mushrooms out of the way? Thanks for saying yes, let's do that. Here's Mushroom 10, the conniving Luxord Mushroom and Port Royal, who's literally just the Black Ballad from KH1. And thank God those Final Mix Heartless don't count as minigames in the journal, because I sure as hell didn't want to rank them. That being said, I do think Mushroom 10 is an improvement over its predecessor as far as a ball under the cup type of minigame goes. I tend to like or tolerate or some verb in between these games where the premise is remember which one is the right one, and Mushroom 10 feels more reasonable than the ballad. With this one, I feel like I can actually track the right shroom in real time more easily, whereas the ballad seemed nearly impossible without pause scumming, which is the only real strategy for these games besides get good.
Keep trying to drive us apart with your mind games.
Mushroom 6, the Zexian mushroom of the underworld, is a complicated one because I like what it's going for more than what it ends up being. It's sort of reminiscent of the Agrabah puzzles in the desert ruins, how the mushrooms clump up into formations that are easily answered by specific magic spells. Blizzard for straight lines, fire for circles, and thunder for vertical groups. I am enthralled by any attempt the games make at encouraging specific magic spells for environmental stuff or combat-related things outside of solely elemental weaknesses. This mushroom feels more satisfying to play in the earlier parts of the game because in reality, final form Thundaga is going to end up being quicker than actually picking and choosing which spell to use. But points for effort there, KH2.
Are you here to enter the games?
And I guess what we'll call the best KH2 mushroom is number 2, the Xigbar Shroom of Christmastown. But like, on any given day, I could swap any of these mini-games outside the top or bottom 10 with each other. Not that I feel like anyone is super passionate about which mushrooms rank higher than others. People are actually watching this, right? You promise? I don't know, is this the most fun mushroom? It's a low bar. I guess this one is just different in that you have to play defensively instead of smacking the shit out of the poor thing. Anytime the games ask or expect you to block, it's just invigorating. Timing square presses instead of mashing X, it's like my thumb is going on a Christmas vacation. It's also an opportunity for me to use Reflect and not feel like I'm somehow cheating.
You're the no-good cheater who's always breaking the rules.
Gotta say, I do not give a realistically rendered shit about Virum Rex. Like, I know it's this high up, but few things bore me more than mech combat stretched out for what feels like a very, very long time. When people say they want a full Virum Rex game, are they talking about this? They don't mean this, right? I have to appreciate how relatively much went into this one, though by the time I get to it in the campaign visit to Toy Box, I'm already a bit fatigued on the Gigas gameplay, and we're still expected to do a bit more of it even after this. I'd probably be higher on this if they held off on the robots until young Xehanort pulls a Captain N on Sora here. This minigame definitely feels like more of an insulated sideshow than something like the gift wrapping game or a few things higher on the list, but at least you get to jam to that Shrouding Dark Cloud remix when you're playing it. As drawn out as the game can feel at times, the addition of the traps is a nice touch, and the surge of adrenaline I feel when using any of the mech's special triangle attacks is unmatched. Like, god, do I fucking love those exploders. Also, what's the deal with the name? Beat of Lead? It sounds more like a rhythm game, like Melody of Memory, but with guns. I'd play that.
In this world, you come from a video game.
I think it's finally time to lay this half-deflated bouncy ball to rest. Here's Grandstander from KH2, and I guess that one day in Days. Is this a deeper, more visually interesting, or more fully fleshed out game than Virum Rex Beat of Lead? Yes. Wait, I mean no, but I'd still rather do this. It's all about the feeling, it's about the thrill I get, it's about the fans. Look at them, they love it. They can probably hardly see me over here, but I'm assuming they love it. This is another one where it's really fun to compare how it plays out when using Roxas's basic aerial combo versus Sora's literally infinite assault on the ball. I'm also really tickled by the idea of this being a spectacle for the people of Twilight Town. Like, the NPC who hires you for this considers it putting on a show. I've seen televisions in this town, you guys apparently have a beach. I just assume the power is out and the trains aren't running and we're in the struggle off-season.
In the next games, I'll take care of them both.
Here's where we'll take care of the rest of those skateboarding minigames, which are still mechanically shallow but have a million times more focus than the first 3. I'd much rather just chase these Sims crystals than spam a trick over and over. But here, sometimes using a trick can even help you with positioning or slowing your descent. It feels more pointed and purposeful, even if it's still a fairly basic collect the things as they spawn formula. SB Sandslider plays that pretty straight in Agrabah's Main Street, and I actually found it kind of fun to see how many crystals I could grab before time runs out. SB Time Attack is in Port Royal and has a set amount with no time limit, so you have to optimize your route and be prepared for the obstacles to get a good time.
Let's head for the game grid.
So apparently the Magic Carpet Escape in KH2 counts as a minigame. To be honest, I totally forgot you could even repeat it. I thought it was a one-time thing like the KH1 Escape. It doesn't exactly have a ton of replay value considering it's fairly easy to take out all of the Heartless on your first go, and that's how the scoring is determined. But it's integrated into the story of the second visit, it's flashy, it's satisfying to swat these hook bats and rapid thrusters, doesn't last too long, isn't annoying, so despite my surprise that it's repeatable, I think it belongs in the upper half.
The game's up, Jafar!
Big stretch of KH2 games here. Next up is Phil's Training, again, but this time it's the best one. I mentioned it earlier, these urns are so fun to smack around and there's more balls to grab, which is a recipe for success. There are technically 2 courses here, the Practice and Maniac mode, and we'll be counting the latter since it actually has a score count. I have no idea why it's called that though. I mean, I guess if I saw this happening in real life, I'd say, whoa, that guy is a fucking maniac, but I'd probably say that if I saw most of these minigames. This is literally just hit the things and scoop up the prizes, but satisfying game feel does a ton of heavy lifting for these minigames. Like, if I'm not abjectly miserable while playing it, that already rockets it above the first 40 placements.
And this game, I can't afford to lose.
Quack-a-fucking-Rooney, here we are, it's Ice Cream Beat. Been a while since we stopped down in Disney Town, so let's clean up what's left here. Before Melody of Memory, both the versions with and without guns, we had Ice Cream Beat, which Okay, I can see a lot of people being like, this is trash, this is the worst, but I also bet you forgot how truly fucking many minigames there are in this series. Like Rumble Racing, this is part of the campaign, but I don't dread having to play it when I get here. Playing each difficulty for each song as each character for the Platinum Trophy, on the other hand, again, I'm trying to divorce that experience from the minigame itself. The song choices are pretty fun. It's neat to have 3 past KH tracks, Small World, and the new Dessert Star Emoji Paradise, which I've become a ride or die slut for over the years. It just goes hard, I don't know what to tell you. And for what it's worth, you do actually have to kind of be on beat for this, and it's visually satisfying to stack up these impossibly tall ice cream cones and watch the stage radiate with rainbow energy when you get a combo going. The feedback is hit or miss. Sometimes you get a good, fulfilling, chunky sound when you time a press perfectly, but they randomly switch up the sounds, and sometimes you get these cheap, plastic twinkly noises, and it just feels like shit even though you're doing a good job. But when it lets you spam X after one of the ducks just goes apeshit and stomps his feet, that's just divine. Are they gonna eat all that? This seems wasteful. Put down your pitchforks and your tridents, let me explain myself. I have softened on KH2 Atlantica. Mind you, we've talked through a lot of dreadful minigames in the earlier parts of this video. And yes, I'll fully agree, Ice Cream Beat as a game is better. It's the superior pre-Melmem KH rhythm game. It's more involved, it's faster paced, and objectively less cringy. But the Atlantica musicals are a spectacle. They're showstoppers, as in I'd probably stop showing the game to my friends or family at this point. But like, it's Disney magic, you know? I talked about this a few years ago now when I ranked the KH2 worlds, but I have a growing respect for sectioning off at least one world in a proper KH game to showcase the musical aspect of the Disney empire. You don't have to do this, there are good rewards if you do, but the game is entirely beatable without them. I think the musicals lean on the style, but Ice Cream Beat skews more towards substance, at least as far as gameplay is concerned. The musicals will sometimes let you sit there for like 7 or 8 seconds between presses without anything to do, and it's not like you're studying the duck's movements for your turn afterwards. Only A New Day is Dawning actually combines more than one gimmick at a time, and Swim This Way is just a series of X presses with those long pauses in between. Not to mention that it never really feels like you're getting into an actual rhythm, the prompts just sorta show up whenever. But I mean, we got an extra Pat Carroll Ursula song out of this, that's something, right? We got to see 2 Renaissance classics in this game, and Sora even gets to sing along in one of them. When I think of Under the Sea, I low-key think of the KH2 version first. It's fun to hear Sora and Ariel take some verses for themselves. I guess that's what it boils down to. It's a bit more fun to watch than to play, and I think the corniness has just grown on me a bit. But God help you if you accidentally pause in the middle of a song and then realize that for some reason it's impossible to resume, you gotta restart. That's just cruel and unusual.
The game isn't over until it's over.
Hey, you wanna get fucking crazy? Step into the court. What are the rules? Don't focus too much on that. That's nerd shit. Just get that fucking watermelon into the net. That's your life now. Fruitball is life expressing itself in its rawest form. Some people believe in the Big Bang Theory creating the universe. I think it was a game of fruitball taking place in the primordial soup. This is the nexus of everything. I have no idea what's going on, what any of these buttons do despite their clearly labeled descriptions. I'm just here chucking grapes like my life depends on it. Did you ever have a sleepover or similar sort of get-together as a kid where one of the main events was everyone just sort of beating the shit out of each other for an hour? Like, not just a pillow fight, I mean anything that's in the nearby vicinity. Anything you can grab or throw at someone is fair game. That's fruitball, just pure, unmitigated, unmoderated mayhem. There is nothing on this list that comes close in the chaos department. You can spike Chip and Dale with a pineapple. This goes on for 3 minutes, but I feel like I've lived 7 lifetimes by the time a fruitball match is over. Once a game has ended, I have no idea what's happened, but I deeply feel the need for several showers and therapy sessions.
Hatties and Walk are all wrapped up in their ballgame.
This is probably a weird and forgettable pick for my preferred Disney Town minigame, and yes, there actually is one left. It's the Ringer Unversed mission. This is basically the final form of the Black Ballad and Mushroom 10 evolutionary line. You still have to track the real enemy among the fake ones, but they respawn throughout the room, so you have to first figure out where they went and then take the shortest path to save time. And unlike its predecessors, striking the false one doesn't just end the round, you actually lose time off of your score. I think it's actually kind of fun. We're at the point where I'm starting to find these fun.
I've been playing your game for months now!
I feel like Frozen Slider is another pretty maligned minigame, but I do think a lot of that is tied to the completionist side of things, and that's valid. I have no idea what they were thinking with the 10 crystals you need to collect to get your Orichalcum Plus, which is in turn an ingredient for the Ultima weapon. I don't even know how they expected someone to spend anything less than a day on finding all of them without the use of a guide. Like, this is a big fucking mountain. There's a million different routes you can take, and if we weren't focused on the grind, we'd probably more readily respect that. Ignoring the Roman numeral gems and just focusing on trying to get a good score, this is actually decently fun, and it's goddamn adorable to watch the boys shield slide down a snowy mountain together. Sometimes Donald begs for his life and prays to God when you make a big jump. It's awesome. One small thing, and I learned this from Castle Oathkeeper in my Twitch chat, did you know you can ask Goofy to start the minigame instead of Elsa? That's so random, and you feel like a gigantic piece of shit if you say no after he asks. If Goofy's having fun, that's good enough for me. I'll be the first to say that the 100 Acre Wood is one of the bigger disappointments in KH3. I was flabbergasted that the world is relegated to one room, a room we've seen twice before no less. My flabbergastedness was only furthered upon realizing that the 3 minigames here is actually one minigame, not so cleverly disguising itself 3 times. They all have names, Lumpy's Fruit Parade, Tigger's Vegetable Spree, and Pooh's Honey Hunt, and they all have slight variations, but let's be real, they're all the same game. It's a matching Candy Crush type of thing, not the most novel concept, but the execution is great. Aesthetically pleasing, sonically satisfying, and even though you can literally just charge up your shot and never move the control stick and still get a good score, it feels great every time you match up some fruit or veggies or flowers. This is just feedback crack to me, and I won't pretend this isn't extremely helped by the KH3 version of Bounce-O-Rama playing during these games, which is a track that is just guaranteed to put me in a good mood after hearing it. Unless you're running a randomizer race and your competitors send you Melmem-style tricks and force you to abandon your task at hand to play these games over and over.
You escaped from the games.
Sort of surprised an unversed mission snuck up this high, but I just like the premise of it and how it plays with Birth by Sleep's command system. It's the element cluster in Neverland, which is relatively simple in concept but fun in execution. It's just one of those totem unversed, but this one swaps between being weak to fire, blizzard, and thunder attacks. You literally cannot get points on this game if you go in with the wrong configuration, but once you get how it works, you can go into your command deck and figure out the best way to rack up points quickly, whether that's through putting in a bunch of magic spells or surge abilities, using the elemental movement skill variations, or puzzling out how to trigger a command style to get easy hits super fast. Really satisfying once you figure out a good system and get into a rhythm.
And I got my hands full preparing for the games.
I wouldn't be surprised if this flan was a ton of people's least favorite, and depending on my most recent experience with it, I could see this landing in the bottom 20. But the cherry flan is like the critical level 1 version of Frozen Slider. This one is way easier to screw up and a lot more linear in comparison, though there are portions that open up and let you strategize on which route to take to hit the most flans. Sometimes you'll get stuck on one of these peat holes or fail to even make it into the garden several times in a row, but when you get a good run going and you're just barreling through these little bastards, ooh, that's good. The bloop when you slide over these arrows, great stuff. It's an easy to play but hard to master type of game, and we need some of those up here.
Don't need them when I've got my game partner.
If we're talking cuteness rankings, there are few things cuter than the Orange Flan game. It's just Pokemon Snap on foot, but I'm glad to have it, because I really enjoyed new Pokemon Snap.
Grookey, Pichu, Bouffalance, Wurmple, Amoga, no, Amoga, Worm, Amoga, come back!
This minigame just gets massive points for being so fundamentally different from everything else in this series, and it's a fun way to utilize the gummy phone outside of hunting for lucky emblems. All of the different flan poses and interactions are incredibly charming, and I'm glad you're limited to 7 pictures instead of a time limit so you can really take your time and explore the area for photo ops. My only gripe is that getting the best result requires you to get 23,000 points, and to my knowledge, you can't get that amount even if you get 7 excellence. Some excellence are worth more than others for what seems like arbitrary reasons, so there's a bit of trial and error to figure out which poses are most valuable. Outside of that, it's a pleasant time. If minigames are meant to be a momentary change of pace, this is like a change of pace within the pace changes.
These games are gonna settle the debate once and for all.
Wow, Pat must really like all of the classic Kingdom games. He hasn't talked about any of them yet. No, I didn't forget about them, and I'll still give you a chance to delete that comment you made 10 minutes ago asking where they are. I decided it would be too difficult to compare and contrast 23 of these Game & Watch games with the other 78 more traditional minigames, so I decided to clump them all together as one general effort, and then figure out where it stacks up next to everything else. And overall, I think I'm returning to that like versus respect factor. I'm more impressed than delighted. I don't know who this was for. Kingdom Hearts 1 released in 2002 when I was 6. Now, I didn't grow up playing these LCD-style games, and I can imagine any fans younger than me also didn't. On the other hand, the oldest KH fans I personally know are in their mid-30s, and I don't think they really grew up with them either. Like, they were born in the late 80s. They grew up with Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. And listen, if you're out there watching and you're older than that, power to you. I'm never gonna stop loving this shit, and you shouldn't either. All this to say, I don't even get why they came up with this. I don't think it was even nostalgic for anyone who plays these games. Granted, it doesn't mean they shouldn't have done it, I'm just surprised they put so much effort into, again, 23 of these things. Maybe someone on the dev team just wanted to share this genre of games with a new generation or two, so props for that, I guess. By default, I suppose they're the best LCD-style games I've ever played. I think I've messed around with a Game & Watch clone in maybe one of those little Tiger electronic games once or twice for a cumulative 5 minutes throughout my life. Sometimes each specific minigame is even themed to where you find it in the main game, which is one of those attention to detail things that goes a long way with me. There are good ones, there are bad ones, but I think the good and my respect for the endeavor elevates these games to the top 20 as a whole. But, you know, the video title says ranking every minigame, and I'm no liar. If games can be mini and inside other games, then rankings can be mini and inside other rankings. Why do I do this to myself? Number 23, how to play baseball. I play video games to escape reality, and reality includes sports. Would you believe me if I told you that in Little League I was the kid in the outfield picking blades of grass and looking for bugs? Of course you would. This is the lowest form this sport has ever taken. Number 22, how to play golf. I'd much rather play real baseball than real golf, but it's much easier to get through 3 holes of golf here than 1 inning of beepity-bloopity baseball. It's a lot more palatable when most of it essentially comes down to just timing your button press for a long drive. Number 21, the Mad Doctor. Shout out to this guy getting another video game appearance after Epic Mickey, but this is not it for me. You folks know I'm normally a whore for platforming, but I don't really find it fun when it's boiled down to an emulation of a 4-bit console. Nothing ever feels right here, and I can just never get used to it. Number 20, Barnyard Sports. These are at least shorter and sweeter than the other sports games, and more fun to play. I get to mash? Count me in. The key, if you ask me, is to actually hold the controller with just your left hand and hit triangle and circle with your right index and middle fingers and left thumb to jump. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. Because I know you all genuinely want good scores and aren't just backing out after doing the bare minimum to get the classic tone keyblade. Number 19, Taxi Troubles. Sora is preparing for his life in Quadratum and offering Uber rides. Maybe I just didn't play far enough into this one, but I got to stage 4 within 90 seconds and then accidentally hit the middle button to reset it. You pick people up and drop them off. Riveting stuff. Number 18, Mickey's Mechanical Man. To bring Spyro 3 up again, I'm traumatized by boxing minigames against large hairy creatures, so this struck a nerve. But you mash X and only stop when the gorilla winds up a punch. I find his left punch is very easy to block, but the right hook fucks me up every time. Number 17, Mickey Steps Out. This one is actually fine, but it sort of fucks with my eyes. I focus on the planks on the ground so I can more easily determine when to jump, but it starts to feel sort of nauseating after a while, more so than a lot of the other games. But if you can literally look past that, this one can be kind of fun, and at times it even feels more rhythmic than something like KH2 Atlantica. Number 16, Giant Land, another pseudo-platforming focused game which feels way less stiff and hard to follow than the Mad Doctor, but it gets incredibly boring very quickly. I got up to stage 7 and there just weren't enough changes across each level to justify it going on for more than 3 or 4 levels. Number 15, The Klondike Kid. I would do anything for a Klondike bar, but I wouldn't do that. Well, I wouldn't do it for more than a few minutes. It's fine. The first like 3 times I passed over the crack, I thought I fucked up the jump, but it's literally scripted for the sled to turn into skis at that part. It also gave me flashbacks to the Club Penguin sledding game. That's gotta be worth something. Number 14, The Wayward Canary, which is kind of like a more sluggish Pac-Man ripoff, and there were already a lot of those floating in the ether of the 80s. The first 2 stages are very basic, but then they start adding in the cats, i.e. the ghosts, though they're not quite as persistent or dangerous. It could be a conveyance issue or just my very bad brain, but it took me embarrassingly long to realize I could walk along the very top part with the pink wall. For whatever reason, I thought I had to wait for the birds to leave that area and then I couldn't go there. Admittedly, this game is less fun to play and more fun to pick up in an aforementioned randomizer race with its attached trick punishment to make Mike Spaghetti sing Running Up That Hill by Kate Bush. There's a list of punishments associated with each game. The Wayward Canary, I'd like you to sing Running Up That Hill by Kate Bush.
Oh, dude, I'd fucking love to.
What am I doing? Number 13, Mickey's Prison Escape. I say this fully unironically, I prefer this as a stealth segment over anything they make you do in Days with Pete or Lumiere. The Pete guards here actually have better AI than some of the Metal Gear Solid 1 soldiers, so high praise all around. Number 12, Mickey's Circus. It's no Putt-Putt joins the circus, but it's serviceable. I mainly appreciate that it's not just a breakout clone or something like that. You can tilt your pole to change the angle the ball goes, and you're trying to aim it somewhere instead of just keeping it in the air for a long time. Number 11, Beach Party. Oh no, it's one of those scenes from the stuff Vexen watches on his laptop. A lot of classic Kingdom games do this thing where the first few stages or minutes bore you to tears, then it cranks up to 100 out of nowhere, and this is highly representative of that. I go 3 minutes without losing a life, lazily smack at these tentacles, I blink, and now we're moving at a breakneck pace and I've lost 3 of my friends to the ocean. That's life. Number 10, Mickey Cuts Up. I was hoping this would be like Mickey as a Mickey Myers sort of slasher killer, but it's just him mowing the lawn, and you're not even allowed to run over Pluto. I warmed up to it though. It's one of the few outwardly puzzle-esque games in this series, and it conjured up memories of the Sutopolis Gym from Generation 3 Pokemon games. This is a bit more complicated though, with the addition of the moving animals and the grass patches that take 2 moves to clear. If I wasn't trying to get through all of these for footage purposes, I could see myself trying to get past Stage 8 on this one. Number 9, Mickey the Male Pilot. This is basically just the Klondike Kid from a different angle, but I found that it felt faster paced and more fun to play, and I liked having to use the net to catch letters throughout the whole course instead of just hitting barrels back at Pete during the back half. Number 8, Building a Building. This is another puzzly one, but a bit more time sensitive than mowing the lawn. Getting OG Donkey Kong vibes from this, not really in the gameplay style, more so the aesthetics and the premise. Of course, all of these games are based on actual Mickey shorts, so really the source material here long precedes any video games. I actually found myself having to think for this one, which I don't normally do on a given day. How refreshing. Number 7, Cast Out to Sea. Speaking of Donkey Kong, this is just a straight up DK minigame from Mario Party, except it goes on for as long as you continue to snag bananas. I tend to enjoy these types of games that test your time management and spatial awareness, so they're all sort of clumped up at the top here. We're at the point in the mini list where some of these classic kingdoms would potentially score higher than a few games ahead of it in the list proper had I bothered to individually place all 23 throughout the video. Number 6, Camping Out. The Canary game was kind of like a worse Pac-Man, but Camping Out is sort of a better Space Invaders. Might be a low bar for a game that came out when my dad was 9, but I willingly played this one for 10 minutes, so it's by far the one I spent the most time on. The Mickey and Minnie power-ups add a ton to this. Simple but good, and I think the highest ranked minigame on the list where you have to murder bugs. Number 5, Fishin' Frenzy. I guess fishing is a sport, isn't it? This one's different though, it's not like the other sports. I've always had sort of a soft spot for fishing games. If anyone in the comments has ever played Big Ol' Bass 2 on the PS1, I will love you forever. This isn't quite to that caliber, but I did have actual honest to Nomura fun with this one. There's a handful of different fish types, the bigger ones are worth more points, and there's a constant looming threat of getting devoured by the giant fish on the surface. I just wish triangle was the button to reel them in instead of circle. That seems sort of obvious to me. Number 4, The Musical Farmer. I know I've played this game a million times before in other formats, but I can't think of any actual example. It's one of those games where you control the path of the falling objects, like Plinko but with agency. Outside of the sports games which have buttons for different lengths of play, this is the only classic kingdom that has 2 different modes, and Mode B is just straight up more difficult. And again, maybe my brain was like one of these dropped eggs by this point, but I was already struggling on the easier mode. Even though things clearly move in unison one spot at a time, I had trouble keeping up by the 4th stage. And then in Mode B, they take away one of your egg boxes, so I consider it the Pro Codes version of the game. Number 3, Mickey's Kitten Catch. This is another game where you have to manage the chaos, and while it starts out easy, it's mayhem by the time you've caught 60 or so kittens. Is the joke here that actual cats tend to ruin furniture with their claws, but these cats are doing the same thing with saws and cannons? Because that's a sensible chuckle right there. Number 2, The Carnival Kid. I of course have to use this platform to flex about being a world record holder. Not for this classic kingdom, rather I am the supreme speedrun world champion of the obscure 2007 and 2009 food simulation games Burger Shop and Burger Shop 2. I love assembling and serving virtual food. I have served more fake meals than eaten real ones with my actual mouth. If I applied myself for thrice in my goddamn life, I could be the best at The Carnival Kid too. This is absolutely 100% my shit. And at number 1, the best classic kingdom game, one that I would actually play again and not feel bad about, it's the Barnyard Battle. This is so satisfying once you've gotten into a good rhythm, and despite having arguably the most involved or quote-unquote complex controls out of all the classic kingdoms in that it uses 4 buttons, it is by far the most fun. It seems like sort of a nothing for the earlier portions, but once it ramps up, it really ramps up. Eventually you get bad guys who can hop over the walls, so you can't even mentally prep yourself ahead of time. This one on its own is better than like at least the next 6 or 7 proper minigames.
You've just downloaded a promo game for the film.
Whew, okay, that only took a long time. Back in the 21st century, it's Flick Rush. I was surprised to see it score this highly because at first blush it sort of felt like Fruitball Energy meets Chain of Memories gameplay, which seems like a match made in Hades' garbage can, but I can't deny that it felt incredibly satisfying at times. Dare I say there may even be some strategy in the battles here, at least it felt like that occasionally. I have no doubt that it can be cheesed though, just like seemingly everything else in Dream Drop. And I had to respect how much work they seem to have put into this. There's several different cups and a bunch of unique cards and effects, like there's more effort here than any of the Disneytown minigames in BBS. I'm not gonna play more than one of the cups, but they're there if you want to.
Is she your game partner?
Oh right, there's still recon minigames left. This spot goes to Balloon Glider, which is maybe not the most exhilarating minigame in the woods, but anytime I get to gather these Cage 2 honey assets, I'm all the way in on it. Granted, you can sort of just skip everything and float straight to the top to get it over with, but you need to meticulously work through the branches and bees if you want a good score. And guess what? There is absolutely no way to harm the bees in this minigame. Good. The wrinkle of being able to grab extra balloons, aka lives, in this minigame already makes it more interesting than all of the wood games before it. Also, if you get hit, Pooh literally contemplates if this is the way he wants to go. What the fuck?
Bother.
Staying in the wood, but a different game, it's a blustery rescue from Cage 2. Once again, this is fairly straightforward, like you're literally just going straight forward and hitting obstacles, but there are few things in the game that feel more satisfying than Sora spinning in a circle and comboing the giant tree stumps. And the aforementioned honey blobs all swirling towards you, it's, once again, crack to me. You can let Piglet just float there for as long as you want at the end, and that's amazing.
Participate in the games.
I said there were few things in Cage 2 more satisfying than the last minigame, and this is one of them. This is literally the 4th balloon-related minigame we've talked about today, and it's the best one. Boy, do I love bouncing on these big dumb balloons. I get it now. I get why bounce is life for Tigger and Roo. I feel free again. I feel young. It's 2006. I don't know what AI is, and Dad's taking me to Blockbuster to pick out a game for the weekend. We might even get pizza. Look at these gorgeous fucking flowers. I don't throw the word gorgeous around. I save that shit for occasions. I actually suck ass at this game. Sometimes I just waste all 3 of my tries right out the gate, indicated by the Sora foot counter in the top right. When you get high, it is a high. I never want to come down.
You've been chosen to play a few games.
I've seen nearly every movie represented in the KH series, but I've yet to see either of the Trons, so I'm clearly not a big Tron guy. But as an outsider looking into the boxy 80s computer, the light cycle is certifiably rad as hell. Even as someone who hasn't seen the films, you can just tell when you reach this part in Space Paranoids that it had to have been the coolest part from the movie. There's another minigame similar to this that I'm a bit more familiar with, which I'll cover later on. The KH2 version of the light cycle is another case of I get what you're going for, but also watch me ape brain through this, because it's styled like a rock, paper, scissors type game with how your different moves are meant to counter specific enemy colors. Unfortunately, square charge attack go burr, negating any actual strategy, but KH Goddamn 2 does it again. It feels so good to check these fuckers into the wall. The Dream Drop version in the grid, which I nearly didn't cover because I had no idea it was repeatable, is probably the better game, even if it's not quite as satisfying. This one's more focused on your positioning, either behind enemies to shoot with your frisbees or in front of them to trap them in your ribbon tail, which, to its credit, also feels like a religious experience. It's also way more likely for the Dream Drop iteration to serve as a legitimate challenge, whereas you kind of have to go out of your way to die on the KH2 version.
Welcome to the game grid.
If we were grading purely on presentation and integration, the bistro would easily be in the conversation for the top spot. I just wish there were a few more different types of cooking to do here, especially considering one of them is the bane of my existence. I eventually got good at cracking the egg, but oh man, were there a lot of hard resets when trying to preserve my hard-earned flan ingredients after breaking this shit time and time again. But beyond that, I think this is so perfect. Doing a quick and simple WarioWare micro game for stat boosting items, love it, it's genius, A+. Theming it around Ratatouille and having Remy just working as a chef in Twilight Town, I could not have imagined something more natural and obvious. I would chop every fucking vegetable on the tray if the game would just let me. I can keep going, I promise. And thank every precious star in the sky that KH3 did not come out in 2008 on the Wii, because you just know we'd be swirling around our stupid little nunchucks, flambeing our little hearts out, poorly. By the way, Remy is controlling Sora, so when a minigame is failed and Sora apologizes, that's bullshit, right? Remy's gonna let him take the fall for it when it's clearly Remy's fault? I thought I was turning a corner on rodents, but now I'm not so sure.
The games!
Remember that classic Kingdom game that was sort of like Space Invaders? Here's a flan that's sort of like Space Invaders, except the aliens are watermelons. This is probably way too high, but I found this pleasant every time I've done it. Yeah, it's just a basic defend the base from the enemies game, but the bell in the center and the big flan in the back serving as a screen wipe adds a little bit of spice. Only lasts 90 seconds, never feels too dull, hard to ask for too much more.
I love games and contests.
On a bit of a food kick here, we're moving back to Recom for the Veggie Panic minigame, which I could comfortably do for the rest of my life and be perfectly content. The only reason I've ever stopped is because I had to do some other bullshit on that particular day. But if I had a clear schedule, I'd still be playing this for the first time on my 2008 PS2 copy. I am entranced by the sorting of pumpkins and cabbages. If you made it this far into the video, let me know if you're more of a pumpkin or a cabbage. You more Halloween or Avatar? To which side would I smack you? Don't comment unless you were going to comment already. That feels too cheap. Pooh, what the fuck are you doing?
During the last games.
I'll give the Kingdom of Corona this. It may have suffered a name change due to a history-altering real-life disease, but it's got the cutest minigames in the series. There's only one bad thing about Festival Dance, and it's that I can't cut the nastiest fucking rug of all time with Eugene Fitzherbert. He's right there, and you're telling me I can't lock arms with him and fist pump like my life depends on it? Besides that, this is so charming. It's really just a color-based coordination test. It's not quite rhythmic per se, but I can identify with that. My dancing isn't really rhythmic either. I sort of go for a paper bag with overconfidence approach with my moves. Much like with Veggie Panic, I would gladly enter a satanic cult with the Coronamanians and rack up a ridiculous chain in this circle ritual for the rest of my days if this pesky timer wasn't getting in the way.
I've always been far more interested in the long game.
The strawberry flan is so fucking fun. Like, sure, it's sort of like Discount Katamari where you only grab one thing and you only stack vertically, but a Discount Katamari is still a gem amongst this massive sea of minigames. Seriously, I didn't fully comprehend what I was getting into when I set out to do this. This is a game I want to go on for a little longer, and I wish the camera would pull out just a bit more so I can see just how high my flan tower is getting. The game has a pretty natural difficulty curve built in, given that half of the Galaxy Toys ground floor has a lower ceiling, so you're forced into the more confined middle spaces to annex more flans. I also like how Sora uses the teacup attraction flow for this minigame. It would have been cool to see the other rides implemented somehow as well.
That's right, you're from a video game.
But the highest flan, naturally, is the one that allows you to get the sickest air. It's the Honeydew flan of San Francisco. Ironically, Honeydew is easily my least favorite of the flan fruits to eat, and you'll be glad to know that this is an opinion shared by all sane people. This game is great though. It harkens back to that bouncy balloon game from Cage 2, but from a different perspective and with more fluid controls. And maybe a bit too fluid once you've gone into freefall mode, which is this flan's difficulty spike. But this is another one I genuinely enjoy and don't mind playing for a long time, and nighttime San Francisco makes for a really fun setting to soar around in when the flans bounce you from roof to roof. Now that we've covered all the flans, I'll just say as a general note, I'm really impressed by these saccharine sons of bitches. I think cutting the amount of friendly minigame Heartless in half definitely helps their case, but on the whole, I'd rather hang out with the flans over the mushrooms any day.
It's his game now.
And we're also reaching our final recon minigame, which shares the same theme of plummeting through the sky. It's Whirlwind Plunge. This game is basically a proto-dive from Dream Drop, and this all checks out considering I quite like the dive segments in that game, relative to the rest of it at least. I actually have to wonder if this served as any inspiration for dive mode, because they really are so similar. This isn't as flashy as the dives, but those also took place in like ethereal, sleepy dream voids. For a Winnie the Pooh themed freefall minigame, this gets the job done. I love that goddamn honey pickup. I love how they form into PlayStation buttons, and I actually love that dropping Pooh disables your ability to pick anything up. Because why would Sora pick anything up? He doesn't give a shit about honey. You gotta save Pooh to re-earn your right to scoring points, and I think it's fun.
You were born for these sorts of games.
Time to recognize the best Twilight Town chore, it's poster duty. This is the prime example of illustrating the canyon of growth between Prologue Roxas and Endgame Sora. Playing this in the Prologue can actually feel like a bit of a slog. Its only real saving grace is that satisfying animation and slap sound when you put up a poster. But when you come back as Sora, the entire Tramp Common becomes your playground, and as one of the best standalone rooms in Cage 2, it makes for the perfect testing ground for all your movement abilities to take the most efficient route. Great stuff.
The ultimate games!
And I think poster duty is cut from the same cloth as the number 5 spot, Flash Tracer, the highest Cage 3 minigame on the list. I know I sort of abandoned that thing I said in the intro about minigames that implement skills and mechanics from the core gameplay, but Flash Tracer not only does that, but passes the vibe check as well. It's just a big long obstacle course that throws in flow motion, wall running, rail sliding, air stepping, and even a little bit of combat. San Francisco once again serves as a great and natural backdrop for all of this. And I think the world always works much better with more structured goals and tasks like this, as opposed to wandering around a big but ultimately empty world that's cosplaying as explorable.
Like a minigame.
When the Twi-Towners aren't watching someone defy gravity to abuse a ball, they're living, breathing, bleeding, sweating, talking, dreaming of, and shitting out struggle. This is everything to them, and it's rubbed off on me. It's like the fucking Super Bowl wrapped in Christmas. Hell, did you see those posters I put up? Just like 8 posters all right next to each other advertising the same thing. Speaking of, if poster duty is more fun as Sora, struggle is leagues more fun as Roxas. I mean, it's at least fair when you're him. They shouldn't even let Sora compete. Like, this shit should be illegal. At the end of the day, it's just children bludgeoning each other until they bleed McDonald's play place balls, but... Oh, wait, no, that's actually awesome. Admittedly, I think I'm more appreciative of Struggle's rabid and devoted fanbase more so than the game itself, but I do find myself enjoying the matches each time I play through the Cage 2 prologue. There's just something about collecting those balls, man. I can only say it so many times.
Good game today.
Did you forget about motherfucking Jungle Slider? I bet you did. I bet you thought KH1 threw in the towel a long time ago. This is the other game I was talking about during the Light Cycle segment. The devs just knew that this was absolutely the coolest shit from the movie, and I think they did it justice when they put it in the game, especially for 2002. Not unlike the Vines minigame from a million years ago, I often hear from a lot of people that they didn't even know that this game had multiple courses, or that you had to collect fruit when you played outside of the first time you visit the world. And it's a shame because those folks are missing out on some solid prizes too, like 3 stat boosters, an elixir, and a rare synth material. The timer is sort of arbitrary considering the real goal is just to grab all the fruit, but everything else is pretty dang cool. Not only is it quality time with the ill-fated Tarzan, but all of the different courses even spit you out in different areas of the world when you complete them. So it's part minigame and part transit system. I mean, this is way slower than just walking to any given room or using the gummy ship to warp around the save points, but this is a million times more tubular, and that's what matters.
There won't be any games for a while anyway.
Each numbered title has a slider. KH1 has Jungle, KH3 has Frozen, and KH2 comes out on top with Honey. This is in a neck-and-neck race with Timeless River for most charming thing in the game, and Honey Slider might win that race because we're going fast as fuck. This minigame has everything I need, going 120 in the 100-acre wood on a honey pot, achieving salvation as I bathe myself in those magnificent arches of golden honey, flying directly into the fucking sun, breaking and then shitting on the fourth wall, Indiana Jones boulder chase except cold, Gopher willing to take a bullet for the homies, clearly being killed, Pooh begging for perhaps a bit more after being killed, 90 fucking degrees down a cliff, thanking every god I can think of for giving me the thumbs I need to play video games as I come screeching into the Endung Plaza, where ear you stop. What a time to be alive.
One final game.
This entire video was just a vehicle for me to declare my enduring love and support for the command board. I know. I don't fully expect this to be a popular choice, but it just does it for me. Sometimes I do want to play Mario Party, but just the boards and no minigames. I'm one of those sick fucks, maybe the only sick fuck of that particular breed. Yeah, I could just play Monopoly or Fortune Street.
But Kingdom Hearts!
That's right, I want to play them inside Kingdom Hearts. Like, okay, it's sort of weird that you could just go to like a board game pocket dimension and doing stuff here has tangible effects on your commands in the main game. But like, thank God it does. I can't imagine going through a challenge run of Birth by Sleep without leveling up my commands through the command board. So massive props for integration with the main gameplay here. It's not required, but it'll help you truncate what could otherwise be a big grind fest. And I didn't really even get it at first, like the commands are your properties, but they're also your abilities, but not always the ones you have in your deck when you play, just any and all commands that you own, even the leveled up ones. But once I wrapped my head around it, I fell in love with financially ruining these Disney characters. I've put Cinderella into so much debt. I can't explain it, but I find the whole thing so cozy. Sure, the CPU players can be dumber than a sack of bricks, but that doesn't mean I still haven't found some creative ways to lose to them. There's just this intoxicating blend of complete luck and strategy. Should I level up my panel or save my GP for when I have to go through this big stretch of enemy territory? Oh fuck, Captain Dark is mugging me on every turn because I rolled a 2 and landed on his space. Am I better off playing a double dice here to hopefully breeze past the spike traps, or should I play it safe and take the long route? Oh, Jesus Christ, Peter Pan just used the pixie dust space to send me to bumblefuck nowhere right before I hit my 4th checkpoint. Should I buy an enemy panel to have more real estate at the cost of giving my opponent a big chunk of GP? I know the original PSP copies could do multiplayer command board, but god do I wish you could play online with the PS4 or PC release. I know my friends and I would have so much fun bullying each other for hours in this. You know how much I like this? When I was going for the Platinum Trophy, which requires you to play and win 21 games of command board, that's 7 as each character, I was sad when it was over. I wanted to keep going, but knew I had no real reason to. I completed everyone's reports, my commands would have been leveled up to 99 if they could go that high, and I got all of the special commands that only appear on certain boards. I would have gladly done another 21 if it meant avoiding a single lap of rumble racing. But alas, all good things must come to an end, as do all meandering, ill-conceived, and ultimately pointless things, like this ranking project. Not such a mini video, huh? It's pretty long for a video about such little tiny games. At the time of posting this, it's actually the 4-year anniversary of the channel. And if that seems like a long time to you, it's because nobody knew who I was for the first, like, year and a half. But still a pretty long time, and thank you so much for being along for the ride with me and for your support throughout all of it and all of the, as I said, meandering, pointless projects that I've done. I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you enjoyed the future ones. As always, you know where to find me. I'm on Twitter. Yes, Twitter. That's what it is. and Discord and Patreon and Twitch, especially the Patreon. And also chriscookieco.com. Use that promo code RegularPath, $4 off your order. They're really good cookies. I still have like a couple left, and I'm sad to see them go. I've been munching on them through the whole project. They kept me sane, they kept me full. That's all for me. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy. Bye.